Live now. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you're at. Thank you for joining. This is the CBDC Broadcast session 25. We're about to start in 1 or 2 minutes. We're going to allow people to join. So thank you for being here. We're going to start very briefly. So I guess that after this couple of, not minutes, but fractions of a minute, I think that everyone should be comfortable already. So once again, thank you for joining us in the CBDC Broadcast 25. Today, we're going to have vATM, which is about enabling seamless CBDC, retail CBDC adoption, perhaps I should say. Today, we're going to have, as usual, these first minutes about the introduction and housekeeping. Afterwards, we're going to have the main session in which we have the honor of the co-speaking of Dr. David Chaum and Animesh Ghosh, in which we're going to talk about many interesting things about retail CBDC, how to make it easily adopted. And we're going to talk about a little bit of anonymity, privacy, and some of the trade-offs that are in there and that could make, if they're well taken care of, to make retail CBDC adoption seamless. And at the end, as usual, the last 15 to 10 minutes, perhaps, we're going to have question and answers in which you should use the Q&A widget that you will find on the bottom right of your screen. And we will try to answer as many questions as possible from those that you submit during our conversation. So I already mentioned we have David Chaum and Animesh Ghosh. David Chaum, briefly, is widely recognized as the inventor of digital cash. He's currently leading the XX.network, a complete private quantum secure decentralizing messaging and payment platform. And we also have Animesh Ghosh, which is founder and CEO of Currency Network. Animesh is the founder and CEO of Currency Network, a technology company that is advancing a global network for programmable currency distribution and exchange of blockchain. So that's my part of the introduction, but as we always say, the best introduction comes from the co-speakers themselves. So right now I'm going to give you a couple of, or some fraction of a minute for you to introduce yourselves. And please, if you want to give us some disclaimer or some limitations of your opinions or views, this is the right moment to do it. So first of all, thank you very much for joining us today, David and Animesh. David.
Yes. Hey, Carlos. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks. I founded the XX.network, and now it's run by the XX Foundation. But I've been involved with electronic money and privacy since actually the very early 1980s, when I was a grad student at Berkeley, and I proposed a digital bearer instrument that had privacy, now called eCash. And then over the years, various government agencies and major institutions have approached me and desperately wanted to use this. And we've built companies and issued this. And so the latest iteration is super exciting. And that's what I think we'll be talking about here.
Thank you, David. Animesh. I think you're muted, Animesh.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Oh, thank you, Carlos. It's a privilege to be here. And before I talk about myself, I would say, it's a privilege to work with David as well. He has been a mentor to me. And that's why we are able to develop. So my background is a traditional commercial bank background with the payments. So about 20 years, I've been developing all sort of payment technology that includes cross-border payment, domestic payments, all sort of financial messaging technologies, ATM card network, all sort of things. And then also I've been coding hands-on blockchain as well. And then what has happened is that when I'm coming from this side, and then David mentioned that he's coming from, he's the father of, godfather of cryptography. So we kind of amalgamated our experience together, and that's why we could came up something truly unique, and that's vATM. Yeah.
And for those who are not aware, that expression that Animesh mentioned about David being the godfather of crypto, that's true. I mean, that's something that you can find on the web very easily. And I think that it's very interesting to hear something like that and to have someone who has worked a lot on the privacy and anonymity point of view of payments or money. So that's perhaps one of the main interesting things about having David here. So at the end, and let me introduce the topic a little bit. In several of our broadcasts, when we're talking about retail CBDC, we always come to some point in which we say, well, why is people eager, or why would the people try to use a retail CBDC? If it has some of the features of cash, but some of those features which are very interesting, like anonymity and privacy, they are not there. And it has some of the features of digital money, let's say central commercial bank money. So why would the people would like to use a retail CBDC? And today we're going to have this very, as Animesh said, this word unique, the unique opportunity of having a solution to this problem of anonymity and the balance between anonymity and privacy. Because an interesting topic always is that everyone thinks that anonymity and privacy should be like 100% in digital payments, but there should be a trade-off, right, David? Because at the end, what would like with anonymity, it's one thing, but with privacy, if we decrease privacy a little bit or we balance this trade-off a little bit better, we could also have traceability, recoverability, and the ability of authorities of countering anti-money laundering. So at the end, the solution that we're going to see here, which is about eCash 2.0 technology plus a POS system, a point of sale system, it's a hands-on solution, a practical solution to one of the main problems of retail CBDC. I'm not going to say any more. I think that you both guys are going to explain this much better than I could do in this very brief introduction, but that's the importance of the topic today, a real solution to one of the trade-offs of retail CBDC. So once again, thank you both for joining us today. The first question is somewhat related to what you are doing in this project. So could you both tell us a little bit more about your current roles in the digital currencies realm and how they intersect with the development of this vATM solution that we're going to talk about today? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Well, let me just, thanks again, Ghosh. It's great to be here, but I want to say that, follow up what I mentioned earlier, that, I invented electronic money, a digital bearer instrument, which had a privacy aspect when I was an academic, a graduate student at Berkeley in the early 80s. But then in the 90s, I was running a cryptography research group. We say the leading research group actually in the world, based in the Netherlands at a nationally funded research institute. And I was approached by the Dutch Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, Rijkswaterstaat, and they said, look, we want to have road pricing, where people drive by and their little transceiver pays for their highway usage, which we're now seeing. But we're really afraid that if we issue this and it doesn't have privacy, no one will use it. And then people will be all breaking the law and then our rule of law, it's a big problem for them. So I was really surprised to hear that governments are worried about people not using their stuff. But so we developed it and then for them, and we could demonstrate it also at the first World Wide Web conference. I made the first international payment from CERN in Geneva to Amsterdam, and then Deutsche Bank was very interested in issuing a digital bearer instrument for use on the web. And so we built a complete solution for them, which they ran in, in an underground bunker, and happily they issued uh, eCash denominated in Deutschmarks in those days. And then there were a number of other banks that came in US dollars and Australian dollars, and Nomura started issuing it, so forth. So this was, I mention this just because to me it shows, well, the history repeats itself again. Essentially, the Swiss National Bank came to me and said, look, we want to make eCash great again, and we want to, so I worked with them to develop a whole new generation of eCash. That's eCash 2.0. And Thomas Moser and I's on the board there. We collaborated, and you can see the white paper up on, and this was the basis of the Turbalon project, which is the BIS Innovation Hub project, which was successfully delivered. Animesh had a lot to do with that. And so, I mean, that's kind of that's the history of my involvement, I think, in the payments industry. I've kind of been called in because people needed to solve the privacy problem. And but now we've got, and then Animesh and I worked together to create something that's like really easy to deploy for banks. The modeling shows they can save a lot of money. It's very efficient, and I think it will lead to we'll see a really exciting consumer experience. So I'm all excited about it.
Thank you, David. Animesh.
Yes, so my contribution to vATM, I would say it's a solving the real world payment problem as such, because I kind of would fast forward what David said, like, another 30 years. So I've been, familiar with all of this financial plumbing, ISO 222 messaging, ATM messaging, all of the stuff. So I was thinking, okay, so the CBDC architecture was getting really complex with the blockchain technology and other things, and that's becoming a blocker. Why can't we use the existing financial infrastructure plumbing that's tested with all, in every way? And if we can use that, and if we make that as a basis, and then we use advanced cryptography, which all David's thing, then it becomes a true win for the central banks. So that's what my contribution in this vATM solution.
So I would like to highlight something that Animesh just mentioned, which is this, and this is like a brief, very brief, simple introduction to what vATM is, which is using the traditional financial plumbing, like using the financial market infrastructure that we have today, plus some advanced cryptography to make the retail CBDC work, to make it easily accessible and to be adopted. So that's a good summary.
Well said. Yes, that's it. That's the essence of it.
So I guess we can go to the second question, which is about it's about not to introduce, but to expand or to enhance our knowledge about vATM, which this is the question. What are the key challenges hindering the widespread of retail CBDC adoption, and how does vATM solution address these changes?
I think I'll go with that answer. So we are solving, I think, we identified, David and I, we did some extensive study, and we identified 5 challenges. And the number one was, which we identified during the Tourbillon, is that the technological complexity for the central banks is that there are solutions in the market. They're all talking about blockchain, and then this has happened because a lot of people came from the blockchain excitement, like myself as well. I've quoted blockchain, the smart Hyperledger, Solidity, those sort of things since 2016. So I was very excited about this technology. But then when we started, this project, then we figured out if the central bank is the only issuer of the currency in the retail CBDC, we actually don't need blockchain. So in our next version of vATM, we remove that complexity completely. And what we have done is that actually what is needed. What does that mean is that advanced cryptography, which gives you cache-like privacy, which David will go in depth. I'll hold on. I'm not qualified to talk about that. So that's the first thing. And the second one is the commercial bank. The challenge they are facing is that they have been asked, or in some countries they have been mandated to own a new distribution system, CBDC distribution system, and that's again interacting with their own system. That's again cost and complexity. So that's another big challenge, and it's central bank is counting on them. And if I think about my PhD2 experience when I was a chief architect in one of the Britain's bank, is that there was a very similar situation that commercial bank wouldn't do it, and that's every bank was was lagging behind. So it's a very similar situation. And the third one, I would say the merchant, again, they need to adopt new sort of payment equipment, methods. They have to ask customer, okay, can you scan the QR code, those sort of things. This again, it kind of deteriorating the customer experience. And from consumer perspective, we are habituated with tap and go, and the consumer experience is like, many people said, it's like a ratchet. Once it is there, you cannot bring them back, for CBDC, opening your app, scanning QR code. Why would I do that when I, tap and go, right? So that's experience. And the third one is, of course, CBDC is kind of looked as like as a tool for mass surveillance, which David will delve into it. So those are the 5 challenges, and we think we kind of addressed all of them. We'll talk about it.
Thank you, Animesh. David.
Yes. Well, I think Animesh covered it. Yeah. Did you have another question?
Okay. I don't know. That's fine. Just to wrap up a little bit that answer. I think that's having those 4 or 5. I miscounted perhaps. Challenges is really interesting, because at the end, this is one of the main reasons, and this is like one of the main things that we have discovered at the end of several retail CBDC broadcasts, in the sense that the use case for the retail CBDC is not very easy to pinpoint, as people are perhaps happy with what they have, and it's like no real difference for most of the public about having a new payment instrument, a new form of money, unless you show them and you teach them very well where the differences and the advantages are. And obviously, the other part that perhaps is not very clear in this two-side market of payments, which is not only the consumer, but it's also the merchant. If the merchant has to undergo several or very costly investments in POS devices, obviously they will try not to do it, or if the banks have to incur into those costs as well. So I think that this vATM solution, as far as we have heard, is something that could take care of the consumer side and the merchant side. And obviously, if there's going to be adoption, both sides have to be happier to agree on using this, because at the end, it's network effects at the end.
That's right.
So let's go to the third one. So this is something that I'm sure that David would like to chip in, which is take into account your pioneering expertise in digital currencies. How does the vATM architecture simplify the implementation of retail CBDCs for central banks and commercial banks?
Right. Well, this was one of the main contributions of the eCash 2.0, which I developed together with the Swiss National Bank, and versus the original eCash. It allows the central bank to take care of its concerns, and to not have to deal with the portion of the user experience that interface that relates to the commercial banks. And so more specifically, the central bank wants to be sure that no one can counterfeit their central bank money. This is a national concern, and they, because there could be a national adversary trying to counterfeit money. This happens sometimes, and yet they don't want to be involved in interacting with the retail customers. So with eCash 2.0, the central bank is able to protect the issued money itself very effectively, and then it distributes it through the commercial banks. And so it's only keeping the accounts of the commercial banks, not the retail customers. The retail customers handle the KYC, AML, and the, they treat. So part of the insight here is that the commercial banks, the retail banks, they treat this eCash as if it is essentially like cash. It's a digital form of cash. So they get it from the central bank, but they're the ones who provide it to the consumers. And so that split is something that's new in eCash 2.0, and it allows a separation of concerns. But there's a third component which sometimes it's worth mentioning, that there's a lot of concern about privacy in payments, and I don't think that a solution that says, well, don't worry, we're not going to spy on you, is going to fly. What's needed is a way for people to, trust but verify. They need a way to know that their privacy is protected. So in eCash and eCash 2.0, the key difference is that the user's wallet is actually the only entity that knows where the user is spending their money. And so the retail bank knows how much cash you withdraw from the virtual ATM system, but they don't know where you're spending it. The central bank has no idea even how much you withdraw, and the retailer bank, the acquiring bank, if you will, they just see how much comes in but they have no idea which bank, which commercial bank the money was withdrawn from. It's just like paper money, but in a digital form.
So this is the trade-off of the balance that eCash achieves, which is you have anonymity in the sense that what the people has is not known. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're still able to see that the people is spending the money. I mean, it's moving, but you don't know where or how, but you can see it. Is that the case, or am I getting it wrong?
Yeah, well, so let's dive into this real quick, because I think it's really important and essential. So what vATM and eCash 2.0 do is they replicate paper money, but in a digital form. So the central bank only knows how much paper money they deliver to the commercial bank. The commercial bank only knows how much money you withdraw from their ATM machines. Okay, and they've KYC, AML'd you and everything, right? But they don't know how much paper money you have in your wallet, right? Obviously. And then when you go and spend it at a retailer, okay, the retailer sees the money, but they don't know who you are. They don't know who your bank is. They check the money with some electronic gizmo, in effect, and if they're certain it's good, they send it into the acquiring bank. Now we use the PRS rails for this, but that's the technicality. They basically send it into their bank, and it's credited to their bank account. So from a both separation of concerns point of view, and from a privacy and anti-terrorism, anti-counterfeiting, whatever, it's essentially equivalent to paper money. And there are a lot of people who like central bank money, and they like paper money, and they're used to it. And it depends on the culture and the country, right? But so, what we've done is we found we could give exactly the features of central bank paper money with tap and pay convenience. So as we say in America, what's not to like? I think it's super great. So yeah, that's essentially how we've solved this.
That's great, David. Thank you for the explanation. Perhaps we can go to the next one, which I'm sure that the Animesh would like to answer, which is, can you explain us then how the vATM solution leverages the existing merchant payment infrastructure, which at the end is what David mentioned, that everyone is going to be able to tap or to use their mobile phones to make payments as we do today, and how this reduces the cost and the complexity of the retail CBDC rollout and the adoption, obviously.
Carlos, can I interject something first, though? There was something I wanted to mention to follow on to your earlier question. I think it's important, and that is, there's another fundamental difference between eCash 1 and eCash 2.0, because the world has changed, and now, it's becoming a multipolar world, and some, countries might try to attack the payment system of other countries. You cannot discount the possibility of a national adversary. We've seen, money is being weaponized, right? And different countries have different feelings about that. So cybercrime has become, very much in the news, and it's very easily accomplished these days, and it's a big issue. So we had to the security of eCash, the original eCash to the eCash 1.0 to eCash 2.0. And so eCash 2.0 now has a level of anti-counterfeiting that is head and shoulders above anything else that's ever been proposed. And it's extremely practical, and it has the wonderful characteristic that it's easy to understand why it works. And let me just explain real briefly, so that maybe, can I just give a quick summary of eCash? Do we have to, so that I can put this in the context of that?
Of course.
So, okay, well, so let me just remind you how the eCash 1 worked was that I, as a user, make up a random serial number. My phone does that. No one else can know what that is. Then I hide that with a layer of encryption. Okay, it's a special kind of encryption, homomorphic encryption, but it is a layer of encryption. I send it into my bank and say, here's my banknote, sign it with the key that says it's worth $1, and take $1 from my account. And so the bank signs it blind. They can't see the serial number in there because but it's hidden because it's hidden by this special encryption. They send it back to me, and I can remove that layer of encryption, the homomorphic encryption, while leaving their signature intact on my random serial number, which they have no idea. So no one can take my money away from me because they don't even know what money I have, which is a concern in some countries. Okay, and moreover, when I spend it, no one knows where it came from. But everyone can see that it's valid. It was signed by the bank, right? Because they can see the bank's signature on the serial number when I spend it. Okay, now there's two ways to deal with the problem that maybe I spend it more than once. The so-called double spending problem. So the original eCash 1.0 said, oh, that's easy. We just keep a list of all the serial numbers that have been spent. And before we let you spend it at the merchant, we check if it's already been spent. And, if not, you can spend it, and we put it on the list. Okay, there's a problem with that. It's not as good as what we have in eCash 2.0. In eCash 2.0, we flip it around, and now we have what we call a ready-to-spend list. So instead of a list of things you can't spend anymore, we have a list of all the numbers that are valid that can still be spent. And we developed that through what's called mixing, and the technicalities I'm not going to go into here, but that is a published list. And so what it means is that if a counterfeiter wants to counterfeit, they actually have to pick one of those numbers that's published and try to create it's a hash value. They will have to try to create a number that hashes to that. But we choose those hash schemes so that they take a very large number and hash it into a smaller number. So that means that for any hash that's published on the ready to spend, there's a gajillion possible inputs that would yield that. The person who withdrew it, they know the one they chose. But even with infinite computing power, no one has anything but an infinitesimal chance of figuring out which input the user actually chose. That's easy to understand. But if you can't do that, then when you go and show your counterfeit with you made with your quantum computer or whatever, then the real user shows their pre-image, and now you have two numbers that hash to the same result. That is a succinct proof that the hash system is broken, that the cryptography is broken, and you have to stop the system. Okay, with eCash 1, you never knew if all those numbers that were ending up on the spent list were counterfeit or not. You would just say, well, that's an awful lot, it's growing awfully fast, but we're not really sure. And so here you get a succinct proof, which no one could create unless they had tremendous computing. So it proves that it's not the government that's doing it, or somehow it's been broken. And once you have that proof, then you can freeze the system, and you basically stop any significant counterfeiting of the national currency. So it's extremely secure and better than quantum resistant. It's secure against even unlimited computing power. So that's the other improvement that we made in eCash 2.0.
Thank you, David. That was a very nice add to the previous answer about how the separation of concerns and how the central bank can be sure that the counterfeit is well taken care of, that there is no counterfeit problem. So now going back, and thank you for adding this. So Animesh, now the other side of the story, or the other, because there are three sides: central bank, consumers, and merchants. Let's go to the merchant side. What is the vATM solution allowing the merchant to do or to have, and how is it better in terms of cost and complexity so that the retail CBDC could be rolled out and adopted easier?
Yeah, so thank you for Carlos for this question. So firstly, you mentioned let's say payment is a two-sided thing, and we all know that. And then David mentioned we took the inspiration from this physical currency distribution. So essentially, in our solution, we have two parts, like withdrawal and the spending, right? Payment. Now the withdrawal part, what we have done, of course as a technology we are using, and we call blinding, which we can, again, David can explain. So what happens is that from the mobile wallet, a request goes to the commercial bank, and to deduct the commercial bank account and then create the money inside the mobile. Now, what we are doing in there is that we are mimicking today the way you would withdraw money from the ATM. So when you insert your ATM card, the ATM machine actually using the messaging like the ISO 8583 and nowadays ISO 222. So it kind of sends two transactions. So it's like clearing. So first one would be authorization and clearing. So we do the same thing, so that the vATM is just like another ATM for a bank. So bank does not need to own a system. So it just like today, they do not need to own physical ATM system or physical currency distribution system. They pay for it. So per transaction.
Can I help you out a little bit, real quick?
Yeah.
Just point out that I think to me one of the key design requirements for vATM has been to use existing banking network infrastructure wherever and as fully as possible, so that banks don't, and we succeeded, so that they don't have to do anything to their core banking system, they can use these existing interfaces. So when the withdrawal takes place, it takes place over the ATM network. And the modeling that Animesh has done shows that banks can save a lot of money because that cash, I guess maybe we will come to that, but
Yeah,
as
yeah.
you know, it's a very significant operational cost. So, and similarly, we'll see on the payments side, we
Yeah.
tap into the rails. Go ahead. Sorry, Animesh. I
No,
just wanted to give
no,
that overview. Yeah.
thank you for adding that, David. And I know you are very passionate about this, so I really appreciate that. And so that's the withdrawal side. And then once the withdrawal happens, in a current world, you have the physical money in your wallet, right? But in our case, it's the digital token that's signed by the central bank, and that's stored in the mobile secured enclave. So it is as good as your physical wallet. So that's one side, and that's again using the existing ATM switches and the messaging, financial messaging, the plumbing we have, that we are using that side. So a bank do not need to necessarily own these any system. Instead, these vATM can be run by any fintech, any intermediaries, or any company, because it does not have any exposure as such. It doesn't need any license as such, any banking license or anything, so that's one thing. And the second part is that then, once you have the money, which is the digital token in your wallet, then you want to spend it. Now, this part, again, once you have that money, you can then tap this mobile, and then that would go through with existing POS system, and then with the POS, then beyond the POS you have these processor, and then beyond the processor you have the card scheme. So this will actually transmit the transaction through that, and then ultimately to come to the vATM network. And then when it comes to the vATM, then so that's up to the the POS system, processor, card scheme, up to that, all of that, your existing financial infrastructure we are using. And then when it comes to the vATM network, now in a debit card payment, if you think after the processor, from this card scheme, it goes to your issuer bank, because issuer bank has your money. But in here, in this vATM model, we have the self-custody. So the wallet has the money. So vATM, what it does, it directs that authorization request to the wallet. And the wallet, you tap it, and then immediately you get a request. Do you want to approve the transaction? You said yes, and then it goes through again on the same way, and then your transaction is approved. So that and that's why it is also cheaper, because in a debit card world, your bank is actually maintaining your money. So that's why in a debit card transaction, the majority of the transaction fee goes to the issuer. But in here, because you are the self-custody of your money, so that's why that entire kind of headache is gone from the commercial bank. So they are not involved there. You are getting privacy at the same time, but then the cost is going down drastically, because the processor, or if you use the card network, they don't cost much. They are hardly 15 basis points or 30 basis points.
Transaction that's doesn't have to have the same interchange even as debit cards, so it can be less expensive for the merchant, and everyone can be happy with it because it's cash.
And normally I use the question and answers at the end, but right now there was one question about, can you give some ideas of what are like the cost savings by using this type of retail CBDC rail distribution, and not what everyone is thinking about, at least now, about having like a separate rail of distribution?
I mean, we did a modeling, so that the modeling shows that whatever the existing cost, it could go down up to 60%. But the point here is different. Point here is not about the cost. Today, what matters is our experience, tap and go. So we maintain that, and even if we don't decrease the cost, because the intermediary who's running this vATM, right, that has to offer it. So there is a good opportunity we are creating for the fintech companies who run this, because they have to run it. It's not free. And the people has a lot of misconception in the CBDC world, saying, okay, the cost will come down. No, if you need a secure system, there's a huge amount of infrastructure you have to run. But what it is doing is just changing the model. So you have, and today in the payment system, you have a processor who's a commercial bank processor. So the vATM is what the role it is having is a kind of CBDC processor. So that's the role it is having. So the British vATM can, where it is making the withdrawal side free, so that bank is saving money heavily, because if you think in UK, per withdrawal, a commercial bank pays to the ATM service providers about 50 cents, 50 penny per transactions. And then that can go away completely. And then in the payment side,
maybe I could chime in, so I believe in
yeah.
the card system rules that on-us transactions are not subject to interchange, obviously. So that's a 50 basis point savings right there for the merchant. And then if you look at McKinsey's, estimate that retail banks are spending, depending on their customer base and so on, between 5 to 10% of total operating costs on cash
handling, yeah.
cash handling, part of that goes to the ATM network providers, where the fees can be pretty high, and all these cash facilities. So to the extent that you can reduce those costs, you're saving a tremendous amount of money. But since you don't have to invest heavily in any kind of new software that touches the core banking system, you can use the existing interfaces and rails. It's a very attractive cost savings for commercial banks. So it's pretty compelling, I think, in that if there's adoption, and so we think that the privacy and the tap and go combo, will make it attractive to consumers.
Yeah, and I think to conclude my point is that, of course, the cost saving will be there, but the main point, and then we think about adoption, is not actually that. It's about, the merchant has to have something new, customer has to have new experience. So those things goes away, and then we have payment is an ecosystem. Everybody has to make money out of it, and then if we forget that, then we are, that it will not work. That's one of the things happening. So with the existing debit card payment, about 1.2%, 3%, the fees, we all bear that. And I think if we keep that fees, and there is an intermediary which is running this vATM, it all goes well.
Yeah, and the per transaction fee can be low as well, so it can become a real cash replacement for even very low value payments. There's no extra penalty for that, so I think retailers will appreciate that. So yeah, it's a way to get some real savings for commercial banks while offering something that, especially in societies where cash has been an important thing that people have grown up with, that people, I think it's a way to make their customers happy and reduce their operating costs without having to invest a lot up front to make the transition. And and then that's helping with central banks seem to want to be involved in the CBDC. And then when you get into international, you have that infrastructure. I don't think we really plan to get into that here, but of course, obviously, once you have a CBDC on a national basis and another country does, there's a lot of ways to do the, to provide real value for your citizens. So,
That's great, David and Animesh. I think that we're running a little short of time, so it seems that we need Cache 2.0 and a 2.0 version of this broadcast, perhaps because it's taking too long and it's being very interesting. So I'm going to compress some of the questions that we have still, especially the ones that have to do with privacy for CBDC users, because already, David, you already introduced and give us a very interesting crash course about how Cache 2.0 differs from Cache 1.0 and how it's enhancing the privacy. So I don't know if you want to wrap up the idea of how the vATM solution underpins the privacy capabilities very briefly, so we can have time for perhaps one or two questions, and then we go to the question and answers from the public.
Well, I think, just a key thing to keep in mind is that eCash, whether it's version 1.0 or 2.0, allows the user's own computer or wallet, smartphone to protect the user's own privacy. And that is, that's a very special aspect and really the only way that you can do it. And up until the innovation of eCash 2.0, that was done at some expense to the overall certainty that the system couldn't be hacked at a counterfeiting level. There was a trade-off. Well, you wanted to have the privacy, then you had to work with maybe, you could be vulnerable to a quantum computer or some kind of sophisticated national attack. Now with the eCash 2.0, we've got a higher level of integrity than you have in any other payment system, because the central bank is able to control the issue of this currency itself, and with this super high security that I've described. So in a security design, you can't really do better than that. So we have user privacy, user maintained and controlled privacy, and we have a very high level of protection of the currency. And then we leave the know your customer and all the traditional stuff to the commercial banks to protect society against these abuses. And really, since it's only a replacement for the ATM cash system, it's not really introducing any new vulnerabilities along those lines. So I think it's maybe not even a trade-off. I think we've kind of knocked the ball out of the park in all three directions.
We have 2 or 3 minutes to the following two, so let's make it quick. First one.
Okay.
Are there or is there any experience that you can share about some institutions, financials or central banks, that have evaluated or implemented the vATM solution as a pilot or on-hand solution or hand experience on vATM?
Let me just say that the Turbalon project had as a goal, and you can see it on the BIS website, running all Swiss, a database that's anonymized of all Swiss transactions, and seeing how fast the eCash 2.0 could do it. And it turned out that that core payment technology was actually able to run at 3 times the speed necessary to handle all Swiss transactions. So that speaks volumes, I think, about the performance of the eCash 2.0.
Good. My final Animesh, do you want to add something to that? Sorry.
Yeah. So what I was trying to add, so that was Turbalon, but then what the vATM which you're talking about is the advanced version of that is actually so we built on top of that, which incorporates existing financial plumbing. So that's I just wanted to.
The core 2.0 ran it was very performant, and then now we have this vATM way to integrate it, which wasn't part of the Turbalon project. Sorry for not pointing that out. Yeah.
That's fine. So my final question normally has to do with your forecasting or foreseeing abilities. So for both of you, what do you think will happen with the low and slow adoption that we have seen so far with the retail CBDCs? Do you see that this is going to change, and how? Very quickly, so we can jump to the Q&A from the public.
So I think there are multiple levels of frictions in the CBDC, right? And then if that goes away, then adoption will happen. And then those goes down to the technology complexity. You know, it has to be simplified. Otherwise, it's a barrier for the lot of central banks. Then you have these commercial bank has to own systems. Which then don't need to if it's a physical currency. Then you have this merchant, new equipments, you know, they have to acquire. So again, that has to go away. And then the customer, of course, the new existing way they pay, not a new method of payment. So if those things goes away, you know, customer doesn't need to know necessarily that, you know, he is actually paying with CBDC. That system should be clever enough to handle it. So, you know, why would I, you know, Bank of England introduces a digital pound tomorrow? That doesn't benefit me as such, you know. So why would I care? So I know a merchant might say, because it's a cheaper for merchant. Merchant might say, I want that, but then I will just tap it, and it should you know, automatically to detect, okay, so this is the CBDC payment happening. So those are the technologies available in today in the financial world. So, you know, once we bring those things, it has to mature. It's not mature at this moment. So then the adoption will happen. It's not a problem.
David.
Well, yeah, I'd like to say that I think that CBDC has sensitized many publics to the issue of privacy in electronic payments. And I also have felt that in many countries that I've visited, cash has a special role, and people sort of they love cash and they like to pay with cash. They don't necessarily like to hold a lot of cash because it makes them maybe feel a little bit vulnerable, but they like to pay. So I believe that what vATM has done is removed all the frictions, as Animesh has said, to adoption by all the parties, including the users. And so what it gives you now is a tap and pay central bank money cash payment system. And I think that consumers many people, I know I would feel like a little endorphin rush every time I would pay tap and pay with real money. You know, there's a stigma against credit and electron, you know, and the privacy, you know. So, but if I could pay with real cash, tap and pay, I think that would, you know, be really cool. And I think that there's a lot of people around the world that will appreciate it for, you know, each a variety of reasons, but some of those are strong.
Good. So thank you for answering all these questions that we had prepared, and for giving some additional things on things that we have not foresee as questions, and that were coming from the public or myself. Now we're going to turn to the Q&As, and I would there are several which are not questions, but are highlighting that there's people still having some doubts or concerns about that the adoption will not change a lot with a vATM, or just because tapping is, as David mentioned, it's cool, but they can tap with something else right now. So that there are some concerns about how this could be a game changer for the user experience of the people. And I think that those concerns are valid, and I think that any technology that is being put into the market has to undergo the real life tests. So that's something that I mean, as I mentioned, those are not questions, but just concerns. But I have questions. First one, and we can do it very quickly. Which blockchain will be used to support Cash 2.0? And I would say that I heard that there's no need to do a blockchain. So
that's right.
I don't know if I already answered.
That's right. So this has become very much evident to us while David and I was working together, because our previous version was on the Hyperledger. and I did a lot of coding on that. So I know my Hyperledger coding goes back to 2016. I started with 0.5 with IBM Hershey Lab. So I'm kind of seeing this product all the way. And then when I started the Tubal, and then I actually understood the central banking business model. And what I figured out is that, okay, so if it's a wholesale CBDC, it makes sense because the multiple banks involved, multiple different businesses involved. But if it's a single entity and that is issuing currency, then the blockchain is not required. And you see, it's a very different architecture than what the cryptocurrency has, like Bitcoin or whatever. That's a very different architecture.
Yeah,
So
let me just also chime
yeah.
in real quick, Animesh. I think we have like 5 minutes left, or 4 minutes, so that I'm not sure, but the one thing is that we are agnostic. We can interface eCash to any blockchain or blockchains to provide interoperability, and the you can see there's no reason not to. It's very inexpensive to create eCash 2.0 as a so-called layer 2, because it's a layer 2 roll-up. As if you're in the blockchain space, you'll see, because there's a single issuer, you can let everyone check everything, and I think that relates to one of the other questions, without having to involve the blockchain in the real-time aspects of the transactions. So you could very efficiently hash everything and post it and let anyone check it, and you gain all the advantages of the transparency of the blockchain.
That's
Oh,
great.
thank you for highlighting that, David. So just, I forgot to say, so we have a, to address the interoperability, we created a blockchain bridge so that we use Hyperledger Cacti technology, so it can actually interface with other central bank digital currency with these, with the bridge. Yeah. Although we are not using.
Next question: who is going to store these possible spending list that David described?
So it's the central bank that stores it in a database because they're using it to protect their money. And if they ever falsely claim that something's already been spent, then of course they have to show the pre-image, which they cannot do. So there's no real vulnerability either way, but nevertheless, they could just, as a matter of record, post all that stuff as in a so-called Merkle tree and a hash tree, and do a so-called layer 2 roll-up, so that it's all transparent on the blockchain. But there's actually no exposure either way. It's really, what you're doing is you're allowing the issuer to protect their money at an unprecedented level, even against the national adversary, and that's what you want to do with central bank money.
Good, and I have a last one. Several central banks see retail CBDC as a payment infrastructure itself that could give redundancy to the system, so making the entire retail payment ecosystem less vulnerable to whatever. I mean, as David mentioned, to weaponizing money, weaponizing payment instruments, and so on and so forth. If with the vATM solution, the existing financial market infrastructure is going to be used, so we're using the same payment rails at the end, we're losing that part of retail CBDC, but we're gaining something else, which is the UX, UI experience and the ease of use of the tap for paying. And I understand that, but is there a way to make this?
Yes, let me respond real quick. If you look at Sweden, of course, they have been very concerned for a number of years, and everyone have made a lot of reports and work on this, because they have, these commercial payment systems, and no one is using central bank paper money anymore in Sweden, and they consider this to be a national vulnerability. And of course it is, because those could be hacked by a country or criminals, or you never even know who hacks things online these days, right? So they could be attacked, and this would mean people could not buy food and so forth, and they would become very unhappy. So this is also an instrument of war. So if you look at the charters of central banks, I mean, that's part of what they're supposed to do, is provide this very stable, reliable thing to provide for commerce. It cannot be vulnerable. But so, yes, eCash 2.0 and vATM address this. Okay, they do use existing rails, and that makes it very convenient, because if you don't have a backup system in people's hands, it's worthless. But it can also be used in a more manual phone-to-phone way. So if there is any electronic infrastructure in place, you can still revert to the barcode based, the QR code based version of the eCash 2.0, and provide a very reliable payment system that cannot be counterfeit. So it goes quite a long way to protecting the national payments infrastructure.
That's great to know. That's something that we had not discussed before. So it also has to do something with, I mean, it also takes care of that part of the equation with retail CBDC. Animesh, do you have something else to finish that part before we say goodbye?
Oh, yeah, of course. So you mentioned about this load on the existing system, right? So if you think about the existing financial plumbing what we have, and then and the strategy central banks are taking, the cash is going to be there for at least another 10 to 20 years. So this load is slowly, gradually increasing. So I don't think that is a problem of uploading of the existing financial infrastructure, based on my payment industry experience about 20 years. And then on top of that, another one thing I want to say is that we are involved with one of the BIS project, which is actually rethinking the whole in a completely different way. It is creating a combined system which would take both a commercial bank payment and the digital currency payment, and that includes all the PPP, pen versus payment, DBP, all of this thing together in a combined system. So that's something coming, and that kind of encompasses everything as a new system. So and this would be specifically good for those countries who do not have a robust system. So that's another thing going on side by side.
Thank you, Animesh. Thank you, David. Thank you both for joining us. It was a very interesting, very lively, very illuminating conversation. We passed 3 minutes after the hour, so that gives us a good indication of how good this was. So once again, thank you everyone for joining the CBDC broadcast number 25 with David, Chaum, Animesh, Ghosh. Upcoming events that I would like to share with you. 14th of May, we're going to have Consumer Fraud and Scams, the first broadcast of this line of broadcasts from FNA. On the 21st of May, we're going to have the CBDC broadcast number 26. And in the 12th of June, we're going to have CBDC broadcast number 27 with Project Polaris, and I forgot, the 26th has to do with wholesale CBDC, in which we're going to discuss the World Economic Forum and Accenture very recent report about wholesale CBDC, which I think that you will find very interesting, you all. So once again, I'm sorry for being late with the closing of this CBDC broadcast. Thank you, David, very much. Thank you, Animesh, very much.
Thank you.
I hope to see you here sometime soon.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.